We are live. It's Friday afternoon at 2 p.m. on the East Coast, and normally you look forward to seeing us at 76 Capital every Wednesday and Sunday at 7 p.m., but we have our special Sports Innovation Meetup, which is today entitled The Future of Sports Betting. We're really excited for this show today, and I'll be co-hosting the show today with my partner, Mike Schreiber, who is right below me on the screen. And we have three really great guests that we'll be bringing in a second. But before we get started, I thought it would be really great to share with all of you, who we are at 76 Capital, what we're all about, and what we do. I think that's, just to give you kind of a feel and a flavor for what we're doing. Well, first of all, as you all know, our shows that we do, we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on Twitter, we're live on Facebook, we're live on YouTube. And then we put this and we share this all across the internet. You see on the screen right now all of our social media handles on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, as well as on Twitter. Just to give you a little background on 76 Capital, as many of you know, 76 Capital, we are a sports tech venture capital fund. We are focused on investing in entrepreneurs that are passionate, that are smart, that are nice, and that would truly want to change the world and do really big things in the sports industry. We focus on three specific areas within the sports world. We look at sports tech, which includes media, which includes trying to push things forward, trying to put new and interesting technologies inside of sports, using data and analytics to really push things forward. As well as we're investors in the esports side of the sports industry. Really excited about that. We're going to be talking about esports and how that fits into the world of betting as well. And of course, our main topic today, sports betting. So we're looking for entrepreneurs. If you're one of those entrepreneurs that's really pushing things forward, trying to do the next thing in sports, we would love to meet you. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us on our social media handles, at our website at 76capital.com, as well as our newsletter that we get that we send out almost weekly. It's pretty much a weekly newsletter now. And if you can register for our newsletter at our 76 Capital website. It's all 76capital.com. Please register. Take a look at all the exciting things that we're doing across the world of sports. We also, have a great team. And as I introduced earlier, Mike is a general partner of 76 Capital. He's new to the team. We'll talk about him in a second. We also have my other partner, John, and my other partner, Chad. We have Krista on the controls today, running things back at the, I was going to say back at the office, but no one's back at their office except for Mr. Holt over there. I see him, Matt, looking good there, social distancing and doing what you got to do. But, then we, just have a super team with James and Scott and our full interns, a lot of interns. So, but if you're interested in this industry and you want to work in this industry, you want to be involved in this industry, reach out to us. We can help you. We have a whole resource page on our website to share with you all the opportunities in the industry with some of our portfolio companies, as well as just what's happening in the industry, what kind of stuff you should read if you really want to be part of the overall sports business industry. So to get started here, as I mentioned, Mike is going to co-host this with me. Mike is a general partner at 76 Capital. Mike just joined 76 Capital about a week or so ago. He comes to us from NBC, Comcast, and Altice. So, Mike, welcome to the show, and welcome to 76 in general.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Yeah, no, it's exciting. Excited to be here, and excited to have a full crew on the phone here, which is and on video, which is going to be fun today. So I'm excited to be a part of it. Thanks, Wayne.
Well, it's super. It's exciting for all of us, and this is just such an opportunity to talk to some of the experts in the sports betting industry. And so to start this off, I'll introduce everybody, and then we'll jump into this. Next I'll introduce Evan Davis. Evan is the former general counsel from Sugar House Philly, which then renamed itself to Rivers Casino Philadelphia. He was the general counsel and vice president there, and many of you probably recognize Evan because he sat on stages all over the world talking about sports betting, the legal aspects of it, as well as just really understanding, someone who really understands the industry. So, Evan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's awesome to have you here. And now I'd like to introduce Ari Evans. Ari is the CEO and founder of Maestro. He's in the bottom corner, the guy with the beard, not the one on the top of the beard. It's everyone's got beards, and I shaved, so no beard today. But Ari's based in LA. His company Maestro is an interactive video platform for creators looking to own, engage, and monetize their audiences. Ari's company Maestro is also a new portfolio company at 76 Capital. We're very excited to be investors in his company. The types of customers that he works with are across many different verticals, from Epic Games to Activision to Blizzard to FIFA to Microsoft to Adobe, Warner Media, Coachella, and most recently, at least that I know of, and I want to hear more, that we just were working. Maestro did the Dallas Cowboys fan fest for the NFL draft. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back chatting with you guys again.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to have a little LA. And now let's move over to Las Vegas and Matt Holt. And Matt is the CEO of US Integrity. And US Integrity is also a 76 Capital portfolio company. And US Integrity is North America's leading 24-hour monitoring service, providing the highest level of protection against betting-related fraud and corruption. US Integrity's goal is to ensure that every sporting competition is fair and transparent. The company partners with some of the largest professional sports leagues and collegiate conferences in the US, as well as licensed sports betting operators and regulators, to ensure sports betting in every play, every game, and in every sport. US Integrity also recently launched their sports gambling education certificate program in partnership with Ohio University and Siena Education Services. So any sports executive out there, or anyone who wants to be in the sports industry, this is your opportunity now to actually gain knowledge of what's happening in this industry. And you can take and sign up for the sports betting course at sportsgamblingeducation.com. And I'm sure Matt will talk more about that. And Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, Wayne. Welcome to the team, Mike. Good to see you guys, Evan and Ari.
Well, let's kick this thing off. Enough of all that kind of stuff. Mike, it's all you.
Sure. Yeah. So, a virtual panel would not be a fair at the moment without talking a little bit about COVID and its impact in the world we live in today. So we thought we'd just start there as a baseline. And obviously, we haven't had live sports in a big way, traditional live sports in a big way for the past couple months. Things look a little different in the world of sports betting today. So I thought maybe we'd just talk a little bit about what some of the efforts that a lot of our partners are involved with currently in dealing with the COVID issue around sports betting. So maybe we hand it over to Matt for a minute and talk a little bit about what you're seeing with pro teams and colleges and groups that are thinking about sports betting in a time where there's no major sports being played. And how much focus there is on it, or not, or if they have their mindset on other things right now. So how do you see the sort of the current market evolving from a COVID perspective?
So the first thing we're seeing is, look, there's been a massive shift away from brick and mortar to mobile for quite some time now. But what COVID did is accelerate that mass kind of influx to a more mobile-based system from the classic brick and mortar systems, because people can't leave their homes, because they can't gather in their groups, and there's still big question marks about what's the sportsbook experience going to look like moving forward. When you have to sit 2 seats away from your buddy now because you can no longer pack in those sports books, is it the same viewing experience, or people are just going to stay at their house, have friends gather there, and where maybe they feel a little more safer, comfortable, and have the same wagering options there on their phone as they would at their brick and mortar sports book anyway. So what we're seeing is a big shift toward mobile, which for us is really advantageous. Look, all the big operators we work with, William Hill, Betfred, US Bookmaking, whoever, we get all of their bet data, every single bet that they make, and we're able to analyze it and then regenerate it into reports for them. So the more people that are signing up for more mobile accounts, the more transparency we have into who's placing the bets, when the bets are placed, what's the history on that account. So for us, from an integrity standpoint, this migration away from brick and mortar that COVID has really accelerated has actually been a good thing from integrity, from a data acquisition, a data analysis, and then, and the ability to analyze that data and then put up meaningful reports perspective.
That's a really interesting point. I haven't even thought about it that way, Matt, from the perspective that as people go more digital, data becomes more important because and anybody that supports a database platform or an interactive based platform ends up actually getting a lift in the world, even when there's not sports being played. The fact that the world's going to change over time, more people are going to use the mobile platforms. So that's an interesting perspective that I haven't heard. That's great. That's really helpful. I guess maybe on the physical side, Evan, your experience. It'd be interesting to hear your reaction to what Matt said as you think about what's happening and how the casinos and sportsbook from a physical perspective are dealing with this, and what do you think the sort of the longstanding impacts of COVID are going to be for those types of organizations as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I've been on a ton of different calls with other industry leaders and folks talking about, just what casinos in general are going to look like, and there's so many different aspects to them, right? The gaming floor, the sports book, the restaurants, the pools in Las Vegas, just the fact that a lot of these, people are getting on airplanes to go to. So there's a ton that goes into that question. But even back before COVID, we looked at our physical sports book, and at Sugar House, I think it was just around 80% of the handle was still being wagered through the mobile channel. And there's a lot that's great about the brick and mortar sports book, but the mobile channel has so many other things that it adds, not only being able to do it from the convenience of your home, but the nature of the types of bets that you can make. And so in-game betting is something that folks have heard a lot about. I think many who have signed up for accounts have tried it and given it a shot. But in-game betting, right, is really where the future is, because it ranges from just betting on a point spread or a money line after the game started, to betting on what's going to happen next inning, or who's going to win the 9th hole in a golf match, or so many different minutiae as you go in through the different sports. So I think that the advent of mobile is a great thing, in that it's going to further encourage engagement with the sports, and the idea that just because you placed a wager on a game doesn't mean that you're sitting back watching the game and maybe the game's over, or for all intents and purposes over, and you know who's going to win, who's going to cover. You can remain engaged in that game throughout that. The other thing that I'll add is one of the things that COVID has done, right, is it shut down sports by and large, and now you're starting to see sports come back, and the ones that are coming back are not the ones that were traditionally the highest bet on right now, which would be NBA basketball. Well, not right now, right? Right now it would be baseball, but you're looking at the Bundesliga, which already came back, the PGA Tour, which is about to, the Premier League, which is about to. And so I think what you're going to see is everyone's clearly starved for sports in general and sports betting in particular. And you're going to see levels of engagement with the first sports to come back, that if those sports manage those opportunities correctly, those levels of engagement are going to stay maybe not exactly where they are, but they're going to stay higher than they would have otherwise been. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Bundesliga handle stay elevated across the board for the remainder of that season. And if those leagues sort of play their cards right in the US, I think that they've got market share to capture. So it'll be interesting to see when the Premier Lacrosse League launches its tournament, when the Premier League comes back, when PGA comes back, what the numbers are on there, and where they're able to maintain, if they're able to maintain those numbers after the major sports come back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see in a year from now. People are still betting on ping pong. Yeah, it's really interesting. But moving over to Ari, your business is 100% digital, purely digital. So in the world we see today of COVID, it'd be interesting to see sort of what you're seeing around betting and a lot of your customers in the esports space, but also broader than that. And is there more activity now from that perspective, less activity, or how do you see sort of the world changing with the pandemic?
Yeah, well, a few trends. So anecdotally, I've observed some of the trends that the other two gentlemen who just spoke have been speaking to. You know, in-game betting becoming very popular, betting on mobile becoming very popular. We're also noticing that because people are not able to obviously attend anywhere, or really staying in their own homes, streaming is becoming more of that primary experience through which people are potentially able to bet. And so now a big trend we're starting to see is, okay, how do we let the betting happen within the stream experience? You saw recently Turner did the match, and in the past they've tried to do things that are getting closer to that in stream and even in-game in-stream combination for betting, which I think is exciting and really unlimited in its potential. There are some regulation related issues that definitely need to be solved with regard to making the user experience as seamless as we all want it to be. But I imagine that those obstacles will be overcome over the next, call it 3 to 6 months. The other thing that we've observed is that because of the sort of lull that happened, it gave the leagues some time to pause and take some of the time that they would have been kind of working on betting maybe on the side and really spend a little bit more time thinking about, okay, what should our experience be? Can we be ready for next season? We've been getting a lot of inquiries from a lot of the top leagues that are asking questions about betting as well as fantasy integration for the next season. So I think you're going to see a lot more of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of the points you guys are making is almost the fact that going through this experience is actually changing the way everybody has looked at sports betting, because it's giving everybody a shot, whether it's more digital in terms of the what Matt Holt you were talking about, or Evan, what you were talking about in terms of people's interest in other sports as sports start coming back in phases and getting different types of audiences. And then Ari, from your perspective, in terms of actually more of the people having time to build these integrated experiences like the match, where you can take something and line it up with the betting and the that type of interactivity. So yeah, really interesting. It seems like we're almost going to come out of this with a different perspective from all the companies in the value chain around sports betting. What do you guys think to try to sort of well, I guess one thing that's really interesting to me actually is even in the time now, and I think we have a chart on this, you can actually see that a lot of the major investment in sports betting, like for example, DraftKings, we have a chart up here, DraftKings, Penn National, after a little bit of a dip, right at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody's confident again. So that this is going to be a huge business. I mean, just looking at the sort of the right hand side of these charts, it's pretty impressive growth in investments and stock price at least here. So what do you guys think? Is this actually a catalyst? Is this a slowdown? What do you think overall right now from sports betting as we come out of this? Is the growth going to be even higher, or are we just going to jump back into where we were pre-pandemic?
I would echo what Evan said earlier, that I think things are going to be on a little bit of a heightened excitement level for a while. It remains to be seen exactly how long that effect will happen, but definitely think we're going to see a nice uptick for a bit. People are hungry to get back.
Yeah.
And if you look at the numbers on recent events, they prove Ari's point that people are hungry to get back. The UFC card last Saturday, which is a regular ESPN on Plus card, did the second highest numbers ever since UFC signed a deal with ESPN without any stars headlining the card, just because people were so eager to bet on live sports. The pay-per-view card the Saturday before that did over 800,000 pay-per-view buys. That's no Connor, no John Jones, no Ronda Rousey, no big stars. 800,000 people, and the equivalent betting handle was equated to similar to what we'd see on a Monday night football game in the NFL. So a ton of betting handle, a ton of engagement. I think what people have shown is the appetite for live sporting events and the ability to wager on them hasn't wavered one single bit during COVID.
So what happens? Everything happens at once. What happens this October when there's 7 different major things happening at once, right? Everybody's trying to get their rescheduled event in, and we're like inundated with so much amazing sporting events. Does that just go through the roof for all the other tangential businesses, like around sports betting, or is it some way that's too much? Like, are we going to be oversaturated? Where like is it going to overfill the system?
I think competition breeds success, right? And so what you're going to see there is, I mean, when the NFL is on, people are going to watch football and they're going to bet on football. All of the different European soccer leagues are here for the taking, and the Premier League has been the one that has sort of United States most. But we'll see. Sports below the major four, ranging from Major League Soccer to things like UFC, right, to golf, to tennis, and this is doing is giving them an amazing opportunity to be the one that comes out of this and resonates with fans and engages them through what I'll call alternate channel, betting being one and probably the biggest. And if they can pull it off, are people going to bet on 10 different sports on a Saturday in October? Probably not. But you're going to watch an extra one or two, and which one or two is that going to be? We'll find out.
I mean, and to Ari's point earlier, so many people are used to watching streaming now as a way that they watch their live sports. It doesn't have to be on cable television or TV. And the biggest roadblock to getting people to bet on new sports before was the availability to watch those sports live while they bet. Now with so many different streaming options and deviations of ESPN's and the Fox Sports channels, there are so many games available in the collegiate and the professional ranks that basically the availability to watch these sports is there for everybody. And because they can watch them, they're going to be more apt to wager on them.
And to that point, that just real quickly, apps like FanDuel, right, and DraftKings, you can even stream certain events through the betting apps themselves. So
that's the exact point I was going to make. You're going to see, I think you're actually going to see a faster adoption of the in-stream betting happening from the sports books who are acquiring rights and who kind of are more eager to add that to their experience versus the leagues, which will probably not integrate it directly into their apps, right? Like when the NBA returns, which you just announced they're going to be doing that from Disney, like you can't even attend the events. So streaming is going to be the only way to watch. But I suspect that they will be a little slower to be introducing betting directly into that League Pass watch experience than, say, relicensing that game to a bookmaker, a sports book, whoever it might be, and letting them add that experience as a test, right? And then another thing that we're also hearing is maybe betting becomes sort of like a layer that an individual viewer can choose to opt into within their experience, right? So that wave of personalization. So you've got one stream that you're consuming, but your personal experience of consuming the stream might be unique. Maybe you're a fantasy player, but you don't bet, or maybe you do bet, or maybe you're just there for the social experience, right? We're getting into like watch together, so you can watch with your friends. You can make the watch together social with betting, so you can brag to your friend when you've made a bet. I heard a crazy stat the other day from one of the bookmakers we were talking to that said they added a feature that lets you show what bet you've made, and then like 40% of all bets are just someone copying someone else's bet. Like that is actually the driver. So if we bring the social element into this as well, I think it's really going to amplify the total volume that we're seeing, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. The social aspect of gaming and betting is really interesting. Yeah, I like that.
It's something that when you take like what's happening at a sports book like in Vegas, and then you amplify that with everyone around the world watching together, I think you really see how big this can become.
I think there's one other weird dynamic, and I'll hand it over to Wayne for the next round here. Is the one other interesting dynamic, if a lot of these games in the fall get played and some of the stars opt out, or some of the teams aren't allowed to play due to contact with some folks that are positive for the virus, it can actually change the way the odds look and the numbers look, and who's potentially going to win the game, who's not, how people sort of the efficiency of the market in sports betting. I wonder how do we think about that? Maybe Matt, just real quick before we have to the next section, how do you think that's going to be dealt with from a data perspective when sort of all the traditional analysis of how the teams are supposed to look goes out the window when we're kind of we may have sort of Swiss cheese type leagues here?
Well, we deal with it now. I mean, the most frequent occurrence we have that we deal with is insider information or misuse of insider information. And it's a big problem is at the collegiate ranks, and there's so many collegiate sports, 352 Division I basketball teams, 130 Division I football teams, and it's the flow of information. They don't have any reporting mandates on injuries, and even the professional teams that do, there's always a gap between when it's known a player's availability will be in or out and when that information is actually released to the public. So again, it's going to become more important. People feel better, the operators, the bettors, everybody, when the information is out there and transparent. If you're a bettor who bets on the Lakers and then 10 minutes after you bet the Lakers, you find out LeBron's going to be resting and not going to be playing, you feel cheated as a consumer. The sports books feel cheated on the other side when they take these big bets against the Lakers, and then 10 minutes later it comes out that LeBron's out. So the flow of information is important. It's important who has access to that information and the processes that collegiate and professional sports leagues use to distribute it, the accessibility to it, and then the distribution to the public to make sure it's widely available. And we track that stuff very closely. And I will say both the collegiate and professional leagues, teams, conferences do a much better job of tracking accessibility to information and the flow of who's releasing it much better than they ever did.
Matt, it's a great point. And the one thing that I would add is that we also need to take into account there's going to be a debate about the athletes' privacy rights. And for the professional athletes, it's maybe less so. But for collegiate athletes, certainly even more so, we take for granted that if somebody has a broken arm, that we as fans or bookmakers or whomever are going to know about that. And those have to get reported out on injury reports. Take it a step further. Somebody has the flu, right? But somebody has COVID. If my doctor told you that I have the flu or COVID, he's going to lose his license. Yet we think that we're just entitled to that information. So, if you're just because you play collegiate basketball, now suddenly I have to give you I have to give the world my doctor's notes. It's going to be an interesting question, the extent to which that information needs to become public. So it's not just a question of when did it become public, but what should and should not be.
I think there really should just be two checks on that box. And really, to your point, for HIPAA reasons and other things, we shouldn't have to know every single detail about a player, but we should know available, not available. That answers all the questions the bettors want to know. It answers all the questions the odds makers and bookmakers want to know. It just needs to be one of two options: available, not available.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I mean, it's really a great conversation that we're having here on 76 Capital Meetup, powered by 76 Capital. We're here to talk about the future of sports betting. I think this is really an interesting group. We have Evan Davis, we have Matt Holt, we have Ari Evans, and Mike and I are running the show here, trying to keep it all in together. And we're really super excited as to seeing so much. We see so much interest out there across LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I mean, this is really great to see all of you out there. Please feel free to reach out with questions. And again, we're all open to talk with you and see how we can help you, whether that's something with your career, or could that be something with wanting to work with one of our companies. So I think this is really an interesting thing I wanted to jump into, and we were touched on it a little bit before, is kind of where the industry has come from and where it's going. So when you think about this, just 2 years ago, just a little under 2 years ago, May 10th, 2018, you look at, or here we have April up here, but it was 10 days after the end of April, right? One state in the United States had regulated sports betting. It was about a $5 billion industry at the time. And where are we today, right? Today with 18 states, right, that are up and running. With one jurisdiction, DC went live yesterday. You have a total of 22 states that have passed legislation. Things are really moving and have moved extremely fast. And as we talked about before, about how technology and the media side of things and how that's really moving quickly in sports betting. Matt, I'd love to ask, you the questions. Where do you think this is going to go from a state-by-state perspective? I mean, you work with state regulators, you work with the different sports books. Has COVID kind of sped things up, or what do you see that's happening out there?
100%. Look, Colorado just launched May 1, and COVID didn't slow down that launch at all. They had 4 different operators launch May 1. They have 23 different operators that applied for licenses in that state. And even historically, states that we thought were going to be problematic because of the number of constituents or the diversity of how the constituents feel, like California, we're seeing a lot of movement in California all of a sudden. Texas, Ohio, we saw a bill get through the first level of Ohio yesterday. So suddenly, I think COVID has helped expedite things in terms of states need extra revenue. We have 40 million people filing for unemployment out of work. How are we able to bring more jobs in? And sports betting, something that certainly the constituents of these states are looking at. My gut feeling is by 2022, we're around 40 to 42 states. You're obviously always going to have the Hawaii, Alaska, Utah issues that may never go. But I see a scenario by 2022 where we're over at or just over 40 states with regulated sports betting.
It's fascinating. The growth has just been so fast and accelerated. Ari, from a technology perspective, from a media perspective, talk a little bit about what you're seeing as well with this incredible growth and how fast things are moving.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're talking more about every day, both in esports and in sports. In particular, in esports, just to touch on that for a second, we're finding that publishers, for the most part, right, the big publishers run their own leagues, like Activision, Blizzard, and Riot, for example. But tournament organizers seem to be the segment that could really benefit most from having the integrated sports, esports betting happen in their streams, because they don't make money from the game or transactions in the game, which is the main way publishers are making money. So a lot, like, for example, one of our partners is Blast Pro, and they have Betway as one of their partners. And, we've had a number of conversations with Betway. They said, we've been super eager to do this. We can't do it on Twitch, and we can do it with you. So let's figure it out, because when we show them the user experience we have in mind for them, they're like, yeah, this is exactly what we've been looking for. So in that world, I think you're going to see this summer to this fall, the first real implementations of the in-stream betting thing happen, which we're kind of uniquely positioned to deliver on, and working with some of your portfolio companies, Wayne, to try to figure out how we're going to actually pull it off, including Matt's team. And then in the sports betting world, it's become one of those questions that's just happening all the time. Again, the personalization, betting, fantasy, all kind of like the data and analytics that are coming from all of this learning. It's all just part of every conversation we're having. So it's super top of mind.
Yeah, I'll just add one point on the media side, just from my perspective, is I just get excited about what that future looks like. If you think about it, the future of sports viewing, sports media is really going to be personalized and customized. It's going to be really, this is my opinion, it's going to be customized from a fan perspective. So if I'm a fan of the 76ers, great. If I'm a fan of the Eagles, great. Then I get a personalized experience. But it's also going to be based on your habits, and one of those key habits is going to be sports betting. So if I make a bet and I want to bet on Ben Simmons scoring over 30 points in a basketball game, I want to have a viewing experience that takes me through specifically watching Ben Simmons try to get to that 30-point level. That's what I believe the future holds for this convergence and integration of media and sports betting. Because and that's just a really exciting element that I think we're gonna sort of navigate to over probably the next 3, 5, 10 years. And I think companies like Ari's and a lot of our portfolio, including Matt's companies, are going to help us get there. And I love that. I love that sort of future state, because I really think we are going to get there. And that's going to be the future of viewing sports is overlaid with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I think that's one, part of the overall view and what we see at 76 Capital and why we do our sports innovation meetups we're talking about this future of sports betting and why we invest in companies like Ari's and Matt's. And Evan, I'd love to ask you the question. You were one of the, helped open up one of the first sports books in the state of Pennsylvania when you were vice president and general counsel at Sugar House Philadelphia, which is now Rivers Casino Philadelphia. I'd love to hear from your perspective what was that like to get when you did that at the beginning to open up that book? You also did some unique things while you were there, opening up a lounge inside of the Wells Fargo Center where the Sixers and Flyers play. But also at the same time, where do you see the future now? What's the next thing when you look at what's happening with sports betting today?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fascinating experience, and probably the most interesting, or one of the most interesting things about it is just the breadth of interest in sports betting and the people that we saw, ranging from folks who had been betting for years and knew everything about it to folks who knew certain aspects of it because they had been betting in Delaware, for example, and the only thing they knew how to do was bet parlay cards. And they said, where are the parlay cards? And you had to explain to them how sports betting is way more than just parlay cards. To people who were huge sports fans but had never really bet on sports, and you're trying to teach them, what a line is, or what a point spread is, or what a money line is. So the range of the range of expertise of all of those who were interested in it was really fascinating to me. And to answer the second part of that, where is this going? I think I would simply play off of the first, which is, what'll be fascinating to me is how well this industry is able to attract sports fans, maybe more casual or passionate sports fans, who have not yet bet on sports simply because they are intimidated by the nature of doing so. And the one quick example I would give you is, somebody like my mother, right, who lives in Pittsburgh and likes the Steelers and can name several players on the Steelers and roots for them, but has never bet on sports. And even if she wanted to bet on the Steelers, if she loaded up any of the apps that exist right now, it'd be hard for her to do so. She'd get me on the phone and she'd say, I don't know, it says minus 130 or plus 1. All I want them to do is win. How do I know which one is them to win? And there's no real betting for dummies, and not to call my mom a dummy, but no, there's no betting.
Oh man, hope she's not watching.
So
I think this is a super important point.
There's a lot written about it, and you can go on the internet and Google it. But at the end of the day, it's still an intimidating experience for people that haven't done it before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to jump over to Matt on that point. It's what's very interesting, what you just described, Evan, is not only your mom and not only people who have never bet before, but let's talk about people who have worked in sports up until May of 2018. They were not, Matt, I'll let you take the story from there. If you worked in sports up till May of 2018, what were you not allowed to do?
Be involved in betting in any way, especially at the collegiate levels. It was the worst demon in all of sports. I mean, the whole NCAA campaign that started in 2003, which is still in place today, is called "Don't Bet on It," and it basically you lose all your eligibility and be banned from the collegiate sports ranks if you were involved in wagering in any meaningful way. And what's amazing is every single projection you look at, whether it's the AGAs or it's some other organization, says that by 2024 we're going to be between 150 and 250 billion dollar industry, sports betting, regulated sports betting in the United States. Yet there is a complete and utter lack of education out there on this. To Evan's point earlier, how do you learn about sports betting? We recently launched a sports betting education curriculum with Ohio University, who runs the most prestigious sports administration master's program in the country. That's based on all the different areas of sports betting that you're going to suddenly be involved in, whether it's marketing, sports administration, corporate partnerships, regulation, all the different sports betting avenues, jobs, ways that people can get involved in sports betting, learn the basics 101, the terminology. if you've never worked in sports betting and you start hearing the words vig and parlay and teaser and all bookie and all these different crazy terms there are, you have no idea. It has its own terminology, its own language. So really, I think there's a big demand for education out there and a huge gap in providing that. And we hope that this certificate program with Ohio University can be kind of the first step and what'll hopefully be a lot more education around the space.
Matt, I want to follow up on that. All right, we'll get to you in 1 second. I just want to follow up on that point. So education in the space from the consumer perspective, but also what I'd love for you to touch on is education from the executives, the ones who work for the teams, the leagues themselves, as well as the colleges and universities and all the people in the industry. This is, as you said before, you are not allowed to walk into a casino or sports book before May of 2018. Now you're supposed to know, you're supposed to be an expert, and you're supposed to know what's happening. So talk about that a little bit, please.
Yeah, one of the guest lecturers on our course, Bob Bolin, the integrity officer from Penn State, did a lecture in our curriculum that was called "So Sports Betting Got Dumped on Your Desk. What do you do now?" And it's for executives that already exist, athletic directors at major universities, corporate sponsorship, executives at huge companies like Pepsi and Coke and, Budweiser, who have spent billions of dollars in sports, corporate sponsorships for decades now. And all of a sudden, how do they incorporate the casino sponsorship, the sports betting sponsorship, the sports betting engagement aspect into it? So we understand that there's just this huge issue. These sports administrators and these sports executives, athletic directors, compliance directors, they have to deal with player safety, referee safety, player mental health, sports betting. Literally, Rivers is right across the street from the University of Pittsburgh's football stadium. I mean, right across the street from the football stadium is Rivers Casino. And that's one of the reasons that originally Pittsburgh University came to us as a client, is they said, wow, what does this mean to us? Suddenly we have sports betting right across the street. What does it actually mean? And there's no meaningful education out there to teach them how to handle these things, what they should be looking for, what are red flags, alerts, best practices they can use, policies and procedures they should implement. And I think this Ohio University, the sports gambling education curriculum, is just the first step in hopefully what will be a lot of meaningful education to executives, people looking to work in the space, and then people looking to participate in the space.
Absolutely. And I know, Ari, you wanted to jump in on a point regarding all this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important to touch on the education from the sort of enterprise or the industry business side of it. From the only point I wanted to raise on the consumer side is that, again, with this personalization layer, we can do so much to educate you on what's actually happening. Like to Matt's point, when I first started learning about horse race betting, I was like, holy crap, like what are all these acronyms? What is going on here? My friend's an expert. And it's just, like with any other situation like this, if you have a friend, they can just explain it to you while you watch and you kind of copy them and go in with them. And then by doing that, you learn it. I think we can bring that thing that happens in the real world into the streaming environment. So if we know it's your first time betting, we can tell you more like, hey, this is this kind of bet, or your friend just made this kind of bet. Here's what the bet means. Here's what all these acronyms are. And over time, as we see that your behavior is changing, then we pull that stuff away and we just let you be, do your own thing. So the interactive layer and the informational layer, again, kind of to Mike's point earlier, this really is the future of watching and how we can leverage the power of live streaming as opposed to broadcast television to take things to the next level here.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really a tremendous conversation, and really happy that we're having it here on our Sports Innovation Meetup, powered by 76 Capital, on the future of sports betting. And I wanted to go back to Ari to continue with what you were saying, but also really think about this idea of, like, you talk about, what's the buzzword that, Mike and I hear from, whether all the major leagues, we hear about fan engagement. How are we going to engage the fans? Will the fans be allowed to sit in the stadiums? Will they not? What will things look like in the future? But with the things that you're working on, Ari, from a media perspective, from a streaming perspective, and enabling you to actually reach out as a team to truly engage and touch your fans and give them an incredible experience, What are some of the things that you see that you're going to be able to do to make that even more interesting in and around the world of sports betting for the consumers?
It's a great question. The first thing to say that I always say in response to this question, if a league or a team is coming to us with it, is which types of fans are you asking about? Because not all fans are the same type of fan. And I think that's, again, one of the limitations of broadcast that we need to get away from. Broadcast, you don't know who's on the other end. So it's just like this amorphous blob, right? But with live streaming, you do. Are you doing this experience for the fans who want to have it be a social thing with their friends? Are you doing it for the people that want to do betting? Are you doing it for the people who just, play fantasy and integrating that? The people who want to shop while they watch, like, who is it for? Right? Because that really starts to help you craft the experience for that cohort. And it doesn't mean that you can't have sort of all the cohorts have different experiences within one watching environment. I mean, you should. But we think that if you try to treat it as like this blanket, what do all fans want, then you can't really get there. So to be more concrete, I'll just say like one example, and I won't call out which league it was that we spoke to, but they told us, well, we've done some of this fan engagement stuff before. Like we've integrated live stats. And I said, great, well, how'd it do? They said, well, we couldn't really tell if it was successful because we didn't see a big lift in the watch time overall. And I said, okay, well, did you look at the cohort of people that actually used the feature? And they said, oh yeah, I'm sure we did that. And I said, well, I'm sure that you did not, if you're answering me that way, right? Like you got to really look at who is the audience that cares about this. And then what is the difference in behavior from that audience? So one more concrete thing, which has been picking up a ton of steam, not even just in sports, but all over media recently, is just the concept of watch together. If we're not going to be there together, I at least want to see my friends and see them reacting, or, we're seeing a lot of new novel things like how can I be cheering, and then how do we capture the audio levels of everyone who's cheering and represent that visually some way in the broadcast to bring back sort of the roar of the crowd in a stadium, right? And then how do we tie those sort of key moments? This is the way we think about it. How do we tie those key moments to actions we can get you to take, right? Like place that bet now since you're so riled up, right? Like, we're trying to touch on all these different fan engagement components and weave them together, fitting with the narrative of what's happening in the game.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into an area either Evan or Matt could happy to have you jump in on this, but really this idea of, with sports betting also opens up new revenue streams for teams. I see, Matt, you're wearing your SEC pullover there, one of your clients at US Integrity, but conferences, leagues, universities. I mean, there's new opportunity for you to drive revenue if you're in this world. And so, how is it being done today, and what do you think it'll look like as things really move forward?
So to start, I think one of the important things is we already see data sharing deals. They're called marketing deals with big companies like MGM and NBA and lots of other big casino partners and the leagues. And when you think about what that means to the league, what those integrations will really mean to the leagues is think about Amazon or eBay, or if you buy something off eBay, it watches your buying patterns and it knows what it should market right in front of you. Wait, you might also like this. Maybe you want to buy this. Same thing with Amazon. It'll say, hey, you bought this. You might also like this. The ability to integrate with sports betting operators with the leagues gives them access to data that says, I saw you just made a wager on Pat Mahomes rushing yards. Would you like to have a Pat Mahomes jersey? Would you like to buy tickets to the Chiefs when they come out to Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium? Like, I think it's going to enhance the league's ability to pull that data if they utilize it right and say, I saw you just made wagers on this, so I assume that you like it as well. Now, how about you buy tickets to the Chiefs when they come out here? How would you like to buy a Pat Mahomes jersey, a Chiefs hat? And it enhances the shopping opportunity. We all talk about sports betting as an engagement tool, but that doesn't always help the leagues. They're not going to become licensed operators in the immediate future because it's a conflict of interest if they have risk management on the actual events being played. But they could pull that data in from the people placing the bets and utilize it to target those bettors with a much more, targeted experience. This is what your betting patterns tell us you'll like. How about these 5 pop-ups appear? Shop here, buy this, tickets for that, and now all of a sudden they're able to get better engagement and more targeted marketing.
Absolutely.
I would just add that, we've all been talking about this, right? From the leagues and the team standpoints, this is about engagement, right? It's about eyeballs, it's about fan interest. And this is going to give them more data. It'll give them geographic data. It'll give them all sorts of things. They might know that they have a cluster. The Steelers might have a cluster of people betting on their games in certain zip codes in Arizona, right? So there's data that comes to the teams, but then just the ability to engage sponsorships and then the trickle down effect from that is going to be massive. I mean, a lot's been talked about how the Premier League, half of their the Premier League's jersey sponsors are betting shops, right? And so the idea that that betting shops are going to get involved, but also that the increased interest from betting is going to drive further engagement, which is going to increase the value of a patch on an NBA jersey or a TV rights deal or any of those things. I mean, it's a trickle-down effect in a great way for the teams and for the leagues. So I think that if it's embraced wisely, this is something where you're going to see a true rising tide that lifts all ships.
You brought up a really interesting point. I know Mike wants to jump in on sort of some of the media rights and things that we have, but this has been a really great, sports innovation meetup conversation all around the future of sports betting, powered by 76 Capital. It's been great having everybody. Got another couple minutes that we're going to go through this, and again, having a tremendous group of people from Ari Evans from Maestro, Matt Holt from US Integrity, Evan Davis joining us, really giving his perspective of what's happening in the industry. And Mike, I'm going to throw it back to you for some more conversation around the media side and maybe media rights opportunities that are coming up in the future around this, and how betting will play in the middle of all of this.
Sure, yeah. I think so. I think what you're going to start seeing is, and you've already started seeing it, and be interested in hearing the rest of everybody's perspective. But even when you think about the NFL rights, you've started to see big digital, so players like Google and Apple and Amazon. Facebook go after some rights in the sports space, and I think what the next round of that is going to look like is probably the larger sports books and casinos becoming buyers in that space as well. Whether they're buying directly from the leagues or they're going to start buying media companies. So that convergence is in our future. I mean, you've already started to see a number of relationships between the big sports books and the media companies, right? So they've already started. I mean, you can name all the big media companies and their partners already. But the interesting thing is you're now seeing vertical integration. So take if you look at Penn National and their purchase of Barstool, they're actually buying the media company. And you're probably going to end up seeing a lot more of that, whether they're buying the rights or buying their partners to become part of that media ecosystem and officially merging the viewing of sports as well as the betting on sports and that type of interactivity to be able to fully realize some of the concepts that I talked about earlier. So I feel like that's going to be a big play. But one thing that I'd love to talk about, and happy to talk about those items as well, is, and I don't think we hit it enough here, which is I think really interesting and kind of a little bit sort of on the bottom third of people's mindset, is esports. And I do believe, when you think about esports and how big it is and how big the gaming world is, you don't always immediately think of sports betting and betting around esports. So I'd love to maybe just hit that one as well, because we tend to have a lot of interesting discussions around that topic, and I think it's something that's going to come back with it's going to come in with a roar here in the next couple of years. So maybe Ari, who's the closest to that world, it'd be interesting to hear about sports betting and esports and a little bit of that, your thoughts there.
Yeah. So the first thing is that serendipitously, because real sports kind of took a pause, we saw that a number of bookmakers started supporting esports officially, some titles, some lines, right? And that, I think, was a huge step forward for the industry and clearly getting a lot more attention. Some of those have been doing quite well. I think like one of the ESL tournaments was also some bookmakers were supporting that as their events as well. It's a huge market already, right? I think the numbers that I've seen so far are in the low billion-dollar range already happening. Now, of course, the history of betting in esports is a little tainted by the skin betting fiasco stuff that happened, over the last few years. I think we're kind of past that now into a more legitimate place, right? But I think that the demand for it is similar to the demand that exists in sports, and the engagement, as Evan was talking about, as a main driving mechanism for having it in the first place to keep these esports titles more relevant for longer periods of time and keep people playing those games and spending in those games. I think that's really the main driver to bring this in. Now, I will say that the publishers are going to be reticent to be doing anything like this officially on their own properties. I think we're far from those days. We might not even see it ever. I think, like I was saying before, that where we will see it come in is from guys like Vi Esports or some of these other guys who might acquire rights, right? And they're like bookmakers for esports specifically. We might also see tournament organizers adopt these things. That's where the experiments will come from. And if the revenue really starts to pick up, then you might see a lot more of that introduced into the native first-party experiences. Like Riot, for example, has told us, they're probably not going to be doing it on their own properties, as an example of one of the biggest dogs likely not doing it.
Right. That's helpful. I know, Matt, you guys started looking at esports once Nevada started approving some of the core leagues and games to be played. I don't know if you have a perspective on that, or Evan.
Sure. So when I was at Cantor, we actually hosted the FIFA Championship and the Madden Championship at the Venetian Palazzo. And one of the challenges to having these events in person, and we allowed wagering on both after the state of Nevada had approved wagering on both. And what we found is that, this is more of an audience that should be based online. So the participants in the contest themselves were mostly under 21. So they couldn't take advantage of what the casino itself was trying to offer them, the opportunity to gamble, drink at the bars, go to the clubs. And thus the casino itself wasn't able to monetize those live tournaments that we had, nor were we able to monetize the wagering on them at the time. But what we are seeing, as we talked about, that migration away from brick and mortar to more and more mobile, we're also seeing more and more bookmakers embracing the fact that I could put this up on the mobile app. While the brick and mortars aren't necessarily looking to host more events because it's hard for them to monetize off that age group, we are seeing more and more bookmakers looking to engage that database. Because at the end of the day, what it does do is enlarge your database as an operator. And at the end of the day, if you're DraftKings right now and you want to start taking bets on League of Legends or something this weekend, you're not really worried about whether you win or lose money on the wagering on that, because you're going to keep the limits fairly low. You're worried about adding new names to your database, and esports allows these operators to add a bunch of new names and at the end of the day help build the database.
Yeah, that's really great. We're about to run out of time here, but I wanted to do one last whip around the thing where let's just give us for Mike and me and our audience at 76 Capital. What do you think will be the number one grossing sport within, or what league will have the most wagers on them across the different sports this year in 2020 as sports do come back? And let's start with Evan on that. What league do you think it'll be?
The NFL. I think that the NFL is going to, for two reasons. One is just the popularity of it and the historical handle on it. But secondly is that I think there's going to be bettors want to be able to use prior years as predictive models for what's going to happen coming up. And as we see sports being changed in a variety of ways, more games in fewer days and different travel and things like that, it's going to throw those algorithms into a bit of disarray. And I think that the NFL is probably going to be the most consistent with prior years.
And Ari?
I'm going to go with the NBA. I know that historically it's not exactly the top one, but they are really pushing international, and to the extent that those can be accelerated. That's where I put my bet here.
I like that, Matt.
I mean, the NFL is going to do the most handle. I know the betting handles from behind the counter. 70% of the bets were taken on NFL and college football when I was behind the counter. But if you're talking about sports that have an opportunity for big growth to take advantage of COVID, I think we can look at things like UFC, tennis, golf, which have a lot of micro betting in it. UFC is doing the biggest numbers there are, and you could bet on every fight, and all the fights have only 3 rounds and 5 minutes. People don't like 4-hour events where I have to make one bet and wait 4 hours anymore, even with in-play wagering. So the amount of games that can get shorter, we're seeing these sports like college basketball with the 2-hour increments starting to do really well. And I'll tell you what's interesting, and we were due for an explosion this year before COVID hit, is the last 2 years, right after March Madness end, we saw an explosion in college baseball and college softball betting, because when the NBA regular season ends, the NHL regular season ends, college basketball ends, that's about 50 games a night that sports lose. They're looking to replace it with something. That replacement became college baseball, college softball. Don't be surprised in 2021 if college baseball doesn't do big numbers right after March Madness ends.
Fascinating. I love it. NFL, NBA, and a little bit of everything from Matt. NFL. Yeah, I think it's great. I really appreciate it. We're running out of time here. We could probably go on all day. We really appreciate having Evan on Evan Davis, again, former Vice President and General Counsel from Rivers, Philadelphia. Matt Holt, the CEO of U.S. Integrity, and Ari Evans, the CEO of Maestro. Thank you all for joining us today. It's been really great having you. And
thanks for doing this.
For being here.
Yeah, thanks guys so much. Mike and I really appreciate it, and our whole team at 76 Capital appreciate your time. And before we wrap up, just want to give everybody a heads up. On June 18th at 3 p.m., we will be having our startup showcase for esports. So if you're a company, if you're a startup, you're an entrepreneur that is doing the next thing in esports, please come to our website at 76 Capital, and you'll be able to apply and hopefully get an opportunity to present your company and share what you're doing within the esports world. That will be really, really interesting to do, and I'm excited to have that, to see because you'll see companies that'll be trying to do the next thing in and around esports. Also, this Sunday at 7 o'clock, we will have our 76 Capital Leadership Series, which will this Sunday will be with Neil Hartman and Leslie Goodell. If you're a Philly sports fan, you know the two of them. As they like to say, they were TV husband and wife on Comcast Sportsnet over many, many years, over almost a 20-year period. They covered everything around the sports industry in Philadelphia, and are just really two amazing people. Neil Hartman's actually involved with our play-by-play sports broadcasting camps, and Leslie Goodell was the person who really got us involved with the Maxwell Football Awards this past year, and we appreciate them joining us this Sunday, 7 p.m. live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please check it out this Sunday. It'll be a lot of fun. So with that, just really appreciate everyone tuning in to our 76 Capital Sports Innovation Meetup, powered by our whole team here. And we had a great group of people talking about the future of sports betting. Again, Evan, Ari, Matt, Mike, and I really appreciate it, and thank you. And follow us and reach us anytime, anywhere on social media, as well as on our website at 76capital.com. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.